In February 2010, a thick fog blanketed the road leading into Utah's Provo Canyon, where investigator Mark Delaney's flashlight flickered among the damp rocks and cold mud. "Central, I need the forensics team here immediately. There's something beneath this ground." His voice echoed over the radio, blending with the wind whistling through the gorge and the steady lapping of the Provo River against the bank. What began as a cold missing children's case 4 years prior had transformed into something else entirely, a mystery that could change the way the entire state of Utah viewed justice and trust. Beneath the soil near the riverbank, the forensics team uncovered a fragment of a child's jacket and a coil of decomposed nylon rope. Items seemingly insignificant, but which perfectly matched the belongings of Emma and Lily Prescott, two sisters who vanished on their way to school. And for years the Prescott case was a silent, festering wound that the Provo community chose to ignore, as the prime suspect was a man who had volunteered for the initial search team. The 2006 investigation ended swiftly, leaving behind a few tire tracks, a pink backpack, and an unspoken grief. But now the truth was slowly emerging with the wet earth of Provo Canyon, dragging with its secrets buried deep within the victim's own home. The discovery didn't just close a missing persons case, it was the first domino in a chain of conspiracy woven from greed, betrayal, and the hands once considered the most trustworthy. Tonight, we will go back to the winter of 2006, tracing the steps of the two Prescott girls, and witnessing how justice, though buried under snow for years, still finds its way back into the light. This is the story of crime, greed, and the justice that never sleeps. Before we delve into this shocking true story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you love journeys in search of forgotten justice, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part. The winter morning of February 2006, the valley of Provo Canyon was covered in a dense fog, swallowing the scattered small homes along the road. The dirt road in front of the Prescott house still held a thin layer of snow from the night before, dotted with bird tracks and a few tire marks. Sisters Emma Prescott, 12, and Lily Prescott, 9, left for school as usual. Both wore thick puffer jackets, carried pink and purple school backpacks, and were giggling about an upcoming test. Their mother, Laura Prescott, saw them off at the door, reminding them to go straight to the bus stop and not to take the shortcut through the woods. The sisters nodded, then walked away into the frigid air, their breath dissolving into white cloud. They followed the small path that led across the wooden bridge over the narrow stream, their familiar morning route. Their neighbor, Mr. Fletcher, who was shoveling snow from his porch, saw the two girls pass. He distinctly remembered the image: two bright backpacks, two small figures looming in the mist. After that, no one ever saw Emma and Lily again. When the morning classes started, the teacher took attendance and found the two girls absent, but assumed they might be sick or had an unexpected day off. By early afternoon, with no notification from the parents, the teacher called home but received no answer. Laura, who was working the morning shift at the town's general store, heard the news and rushed back. The house was unnervingly quiet. The breakfast table still held the untouched milk and a slice of toast, the back door slightly ajar, and outside, only the children's footprints marked the snow before disappearing near the fence. Laura hurriedly walked the routers usually took to school, following the pine trees, calling out each of their names, but only the sound of the wind answered. By midday, worry turned into panic. She searched at the neighbors' houses, asked residents around the area, but no one had seen anything after the two girls crossed the wooden bridge that morning. Their father, James Prescott, who was working at an auto repair shop, left work immediately when his wife called. They split up to search along the forest edge, the creek, past the bus stop, and the schoolyard, but found no trace. As the sun set behind the Wasatch Range, the faint remaining light fell upon the closed-up house. Laura sat down on the doorstep, her gloves soaked from melted snow, while James walked aimlessly around the garden, his flashlight beam wavering on the ground. They called their daughters' names again, their voices hoarse, but only the sound of water running under the bridge echoed back. As night fell, the temperature plummeted, and the fog thickened, swallowing all sounds from the small neighborhood. In the brightly lit kitchen, Laura's hands trembled as she picked up the phone to dial the Utah County Sheriff's emergency number. The duty officer, Sergeant Eric Henson, tried to keep his voice calm as he listened to the woman on the other end of the line say that 2 children had been missing since the morning. He asked for the necessary information: names, ages, heights, clothing when they left home, direction of travel, and the last time they were seen. When he heard the detail that both girls were very young and had been missing for over 10 hours, his expression tightened. Henson immediately opened an emergency file, transferred the line to the command center, and notified the patrol unit in the Provo Canyon area. 15 minutes later, the first 2 patrol cars left the headquarters, speeding through the cold night. The neighborhood where the Prescott family lived was nestled in the valley, with only a few dozen homes and one dirt road connecting to the highway. When the police cars arrived, their headlights swept through the fog-covered pine trees, revealing Laura Prescott standing on the porch, clutching her daughter's scarf tightly. Police immediately sealed off the area around the house, took initial information from the parents, and checked the nearby vicinity. On the damp snow behind the yard, they saw a few small footprints leading out to the path towards the wooden bridge. Henson reported back to the command center, requesting the deployment of a level 1 search team. The next morning, the entire county force was mobilized. Sheriff Mark Delaney was present to take direct command. He quickly set up a field command center right in front of the Prescott yard, where topographical maps were spread out on an aluminum table. The morning temperature was low. Everyone's breath turned into white smoke. Local rescue teams, firefighters, and even civilian volunteers began to divide into groups according to police instructions. The areas were segmented into 4 search rings around the neighborhood, along the Provo Riverbank, the northern forest section, and the trail leading up to the rocky hill. By mid-morning, the K-9 unit from Salt Lake City arrived with 4 trained tracking dogs. They began following the scent from the Prescott house, taking the path out to the bridge. The scent trail extended for a few hundred yards before abruptly vanishing at the riverbank area. Police noted the location, planted marker flags, and extended the search radius an additional 2 miles downstream. Overhead, a search helicopter circled, its spotlight scanning the melting river. On the ground, groups of volunteers walked in a line, a few yards apart, carefully checking every bush and rock. Meanwhile, the technical team collected evidence around the house: mud samples, fabric fibers, adult shoe prints, and children's footprints. Crime scene specialists took photographs, measurements, and sealed every piece of evidence, no matter how small. The adult shoe prints heading towards the river bridge, which were deeper than the children's prints, caught Delaney's attention. He requested a diagram simulating the children's movement path, and a sweep of all surveillance cameras within a 3-mile radius, though he knew the neighborhood had almost no complete CCTV system. In the afternoon, the weather became more severe. Cold wind lashed faces, and fog rising from the river obscured visibility. A rescue team reported finding large tire tracks imprinted on the soft ground near the creek bank, possibly from a 4-wheel drive truck. Mud samples and the tire tracks were photographed and compared to common tire types in the area. This information led the command center to temporarily shift its hypothesis: the possibility that the 2 sisters were stopped and taken away by vehicle. While the forensics team continued to work, many local residents volunteered to search. They divided up and walked along the small roads, calling out the children's names. No one knew whether the girls were still somewhere nearby or had been taken farther away. James Prescott, the girl's father, asked to join the search team, but the police asked him to stay to assist with information and identification. Worry was etched clearly on his face, while Laura sat in an ambulance, trembling from the cold and exhaustion. By evening, after more than 12 hours of fruitless searching, police decided to expand the radius an additional 5 miles along the Provo River and the southern forest. A team of technicians installed temporary lighting, illuminating the entire wooden bridge area, considered the last point where the sisters were seen. Evening news reports on local television began broadcasting information about the disappearance, accompanied by photos of the 2 girls with radiant smiles. Many calls poured into the sheriff's office, mostly words of encouragement or vague clues. Delaney reviewed the map with red dots marking every searched location. There was nothing concrete, only empty spaces. As night deepened, the wind blew harder, and snow began to fall sporadically. The rescue team tightened their formation, continuing to sweep around the bend of the river where the tire tracks were found. They worked late into the night, their flashlights wavering among the pine forest. Everyone was exhausted, but no one dared to stop. When the clock passed midnight, Delaney ordered a temporary halt, leaving only 2 teams on standby by the river. The entire valley fell silent, with only the reflection of police car lights on the snow. Over the radio, Sergeant Henson's deep voice echoed, "No new signal. The 2 children are still missing," and in the distance, the Provo River flowed relentlessly, in the cold night, carrying away the fragile hope remaining in the entire town. The fog dissipated slowly, revealing patches of forest with weak sunlight. The rescue teams began moving from the wooden bridge area, along the Provo River downstream, where they had stopped the previous night, due to darkness and the biting cold wind. The river water was higher due to melting ice, carrying floating branches and debris. Groups of volunteers walked abreast, some holding probing sticks, others observing the rocky banks. No one spoke much, only the crunching of boots on the thin mud and the crackling radio in the silent space. Near noon, Sergeant Henson's team received a radio signal from Team 3 in the old concrete bridge area, over a mile from the Prescott house. A volunteer had spotted a pink object wedged between rocks at the foot of the bridge. The technical team was immediately dispatched. When they arrived, the scene was clear. A pale pink school backpack lay tilted on the wet ground, one strap torn and stained with smeared mud. It looked as if it had been thrown down from above, the zipper still closed tightly. Henson signaled everyone to keep their distance, calling the mobile forensics unit to the scene. Technicians in protective suits proceeded to collect samples. They took overall photos from 4 angles, numbered and meticulously documented everything. When they opened the zipper, inside the backpack were familiar items. A few notebooks, labeled with Lily Prescott's name, a cat-shaped pencil case, an unopened lunchbox, and a neatly folded test paper. There were no signs of struggle, no large tears. All items were intact. Henson noted in the report, "Condition original, likely dropped or thrown into the water for a short period." As the forensics team worked, a rescue member noticed a strange shape in the mud nearby. He bent down to observe and called everyone over. A few yards from the backpack's location, on the soft, damp ground, a clear 4-wheel drive tire track appeared, showing every tread. The track ran parallel to the river's edge, heading toward the sparse forest. Police immediately took photos, measuring the width and distance between the 2 treads. According to preliminary analysis, this could be a medium-sized truck, common among local residents working in mechanics, construction or towing. The tire track was deep and clear, indicating the vehicle had stopped at the spot, not just driven past. Sheriff Delaney arrived at the scene shortly after. He stood silently looking at the backpack and the sealed evidence bag, his eyes heavy. This was the first piece of physical evidence after more than 36 hours of searching, but it also confirmed the abduction hypothesis. Delaney requested the entire area around the bridge be sealed off within a 50-meter radius, setting up barriers and preventing unauthorized entry. A second investigation team was dispatched to sweep the entire adjacent riverbank area, searching for footprints, fibers, or any other related items. In the afternoon, the forensics unit completed sample collection. They took mud samples from the backpack, determined the time of water exposure, and collected microscopic hair and dust fibers. A technician noticed a tiny metal fragment attached to the zipper, like a piece of a jacket's zipper pull. This sample was also sealed and sent to the state lab. Meanwhile, Henson and the investigation team walked along the riverbank in the direction of the tire tracks, and just a few hundred yards later, they noticed the ground was churned up, as if a vehicle had made a sharp turn. The grass was flattened, the soft earth deeply sunken, and the tire tracks disappeared after a section of rocky road. Here they found a few more faint pale blue fabric fibers, caught on a low bush. Police documented the entire scene on the map, marking it as the first point of contact, where the main incident was likely to have occurred. Investigators speculated that the vehicle had stopped here, and one of the 2 girls might have been pulled into the vehicle while the other tried to run away. This theory was supported by the initial direction of the children's footprints, parallel to the river, which abruptly ended near the tire tracks. Returning to the field command center, Delaney held an urgent meeting with the entire team. He requested a sweep of the list of all 4-wheel drive trucks registered in the area in the last 3 months, and contact with the traffic authority to check camera footage along Highway 8. He also proposed comparing the tire track sample with the state database to identify the specific tire type. At the Prescott house, news of the backpack was quickly conveyed. Laura sat motionless in the living room, her hands trembling as police confirmed the item belonged to her younger daughter. James tried to remain calm, but his face was ashen. They asked if there were any signs that the two children were still alive, but Delaney remained silent, saying only that all avenues are being explored. Late afternoon, the rare winter sun shone on the muddy river. The scene under the bridge remained brightly lit by the technical team's lights. Each sealed bag was loaded onto the vehicle, destined for the state's examination center. Henson looked down at the water, where the backpack had lain, feeling an indescribable unease. The river flowed steadily, carrying debris and mud, but in that strange silence, he knew that the search was about to enter a new phase, where every clue could lead to the truth, or be a dead end with no way out. 2 days after Lily's backpack was found, the search was expanded deeper into the eastern mountain range. The Diamond Fork Canyon area, nearly 10 miles from the initial site, was chosen as the focal point because of its rugged terrain, numerous small creeks and trails that extended from the Provo River. That morning, a group of volunteers scouted along the dirt road connecting the two areas. The weather was cold and humid, a thin mist clung to the pine canopy, and the air was thick with the smell of wet earth. Close to noon, as the group reached a narrow ravine, one member suddenly noticed something caught in the low bushes about 30 yards from the road. At first, they thought it was a trash bag or a piece of cloth carried by the wind, but as they approached, the lead person recognized the strange color, similar to the coat that police had described belonging to Emma. He immediately stopped and signaled for everyone not to move close. The team leader used the radio to call back to the command center. Object suspected to be human remains found at Diamond Fork coordinates. Forensic support needed. The message quickly reached Sheriff Delaney, and within 20 minutes, the entire area was sealed off. When the forensics team arrived, the scene silenced everyone. Emma Prescott's body lay on her side on the earthen slope, partially covered by bushes. Her hands were bound with white nylon cord, and there were scratches on her neck and arm. The jacket was still on, but it was stained with the distinct red mud of the southern mining region. Her face was turned up, her eyes closed, with a serene expression as if she were asleep. A forensic specialist crouched down to observe, initially noting signs of movement on the body. The mud on the clothing and the soil beneath her back were inconsistent, indicating the body had been dragged from another location to this spot. They erected a temporary white tarp barrier, photographed the scene, and began the sample collection process. Each area surrounding the body was divided into numbered grids, from A1 to F6. Technicians collected samples of soil, fibers, hair and nylon fragments. One end of the binding cord was severed, the other was tightly cinched around the victim's small wrist. Beneath the mud, they found 2 large stones placed close together, likely used to cover the body. Henson stood behind the police tape, his eyes sinking as he saw the small girl's shoes almost entirely covered in mud. He knew that the hope of finding both girls alive had vanished. As the body was brought up on a stretcher, the forensics team quickly covered it with a white sheet and transferred it to a specialized vehicle. A forensic pathologist noted in the scene report, no obvious fatal wounds outside the neck area, no signs of sexual assault, time of death estimated to be just over a day after the disappearance. Next to the body, the technical team found a few additional strands of dark gray fiber, snagged on a branch. They had a synthetic structure, often used in industrial protective clothing. Police immediately sealed these samples and transported them to the lab for examination along with the red mud samples clinging to the victim's clothing. Delaney arrived at the scene shortly after. He walked around the area, observing the terrain. Diamond Fork was virtually uninhabited, with only dirt roads for trucks passing through abandoned clay mines. This led police to believe the perpetrator was either familiar with the area or had worked there previously. He requested the mapping team to reconstruct the shortest possible route from Provo Canyon to Diamond Fork, and at the same time, check for any vehicles entering or exiting this area over the past 3 days. News of the body quickly reached the command center. Laura and James Prescott were notified but advised not to come to the scene. Laura fainted immediately upon hearing the news. James remained silent, not uttering a word. The officer in charge of family liaison tried to offer comfort, but no one knew what to say in that moment. Everyone on the team understood that the search was no longer a rescue operation. It had officially transitioned into a murder investigation. Late in the afternoon, the scene was cleared, leaving only stake markers and the tire tracks of the forensic convoy imprinted on the red earth. On the way back, Delaney had a quick word with Henson. "We need the fiber analysis results as soon as possible. This could be the key." Henson nodded, knowing time was running out. In the end-of-day report, the command center noted, "Female body discovered, approximately 12 years old, identified as Emma Prescott, hands bound with nylon, showing signs of movement. Industrial gray fiber and red mud samples found at the scene. Second victim, Lily Prescott, has not been found." That night, the lights from the Diamond Fork area still shone brightly across the sky. Police cars drove away in silent procession. At the base of the mountain, the small river still flowed through the rocks, blending with the pale red of the mud, a color that no one on the investigative team dared to call Earth anymore. The following morning, at the Utah State Forensic Center in Provo, the examination room was completely sealed off for a specialized autopsy. On the steel table in the cold room, Emma Prescott's body was covered with a thin white sheet, surrounded by 4 forensic technicians and Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Elaine Morris, who had handled hundreds of cases, but still showed visible tension as she entered the room. All procedures were fully video recorded, every step adhering to federal protocol. Dr. Morris began by documenting the overall condition of the body. The girl was about 4 feet 9 inches tall, normal build, with no signs of malnutrition or illness. The clothing was carefully removed and sealed separately in evidence bags. The skin surface had multiple minor abrasions on the arms and knees, signs indicating the victim was dragged across the ground or scraped against hard objects after death. Notably, a round and parallel, elongated bruise deep purple in color, was found around the neck, consistent with the shape of the nylon cord found at the scene. Upon cutting tissue samples and conducting measurements, Morris conclusively determined the cause of death was asphyxia due to strangulation. There were no other fatal injuries, nor any signs of sexual assault. While the doctor performed the autopsy, forensic technicians collected every potentially valuable sample. From beneath Emma's fingernails, they retrieved a foreign skin cell sample, possibly belonging to the perpetrator during a struggle. The sample was sealed in a glass tube and immediately transferred to the DNA analysis lab. Additionally, from the right sleeve and collar, technicians found dark gray fibers, synthetic in nature, with a characteristic double-strand structure, typical of technical fabric used in protective gear or utility worker uniform. This detail drew particular attention from the investigative team, as this type of fabric is not common in everyday wear. The victim's pants and shoes were stained with distinctive reddish-brown mud. Geotechnical technician Peter Lang was called in to analyze the mineral sample. After analyzing the composition, he concluded the mud contained high concentrations of hematite and bentonite, matching the type of earth excavated in the southern Utah mining areas, particularly around Spanish Fork, nearly 30 miles from where the body was discovered. This result reinforced the hypothesis that Emma was not murdered at Diamond Fork, but was brought from another location and disposed of there. The same afternoon, a preliminary report was sent to Sheriff Delaney's office. The summary was concise but heavy. Cause of death, asphyxia due to strangulation. Time of death approximately 24 to 36 hours after disappearance. Evidence gray fiber, foreign DNA sample under fingernails, mineral mud consistent with southern mine earth. Conclusion: victim was murdered at a different location, body was moved. Delaney read each line, then remained silent for a long time. He understood this information would completely reorient the entire investigation. If the body was moved, the perpetrator not only had a vehicle but also had to be familiar with the treacherous mountain roads. He immediately instructed the mapping team to reconstruct plausible travel routes between Provo Canyon and the Spanish Fork mining area, identifying sections accessible by four-wheel drive trucks. Meanwhile, Henson was tasked with liaising with the state DNA lab. Results from the skin cell analysis were expected to take at least 3 days. That evening, in the temporary office at the county headquarters, Delaney held a brief meeting with the investigation team. He requested that the gray fiber samples be compared with technical uniform samples from utility companies, mining companies, and factories near the area. Henson reported that within a 20-mile radius of Provo alone, more than 300 people used similar uniform. "We have to filter by vehicle type and work shifts," Delaney said, his voice low. "The person who brought the body to Diamond Fork must have used a truck." At the same time, the forensics lab continued to finalize the detailed report. Under the microscope, the nylon cord used to bind the hands showed signs of wear and an old cut, suggesting it was manually severed from a large spool, not a retail civil cord. A similar cord sample was also found in the river bridge area, a detail that led technicians to believe the perpetrator might have prepared the cord beforehand and used the same type for both victims. As the clock neared midnight, the mineral mud analysis results were faxed to the command center. The report was less than 2 pages long, but the concluding sentence made Delaney read it over repeatedly. "The mineral composition in the soil sample from the victim's clothing is an exact match for the earth from Spanish Fork Mine 4, a specific type rarely found outside this area." This meant someone had transported Emma's body from the mine area, a remote and hard-to-access location, to Diamond Fork, and disposed of it under the cover of night. Delaney stood looking at the large map spread on the wall, where red pins marked 2 points: Provo Canyon, where the 2 children disappeared, and Diamond Fork, where the body was found. Between those 2 points lay dozens of miles of winding forest roads, mostly familiar only to locals or mining workers. "This person knew exactly what they were doing," he murmured, "and they weren't in a hurry." That night, the complete forensic report was submitted, concluding the first phase of the investigation. The conclusion was clear, cold and painful. Emma Prescott died from strangulation. Her body was moved and disposed of. Physical evidence suggested the perpetrator was knowledgeable about the terrain and had access to specialized transportation. The remaining question, who did this, still hung in the chemically saturated air of the examination room, where fluorescent lights reflected off the white sheet, covering the small form just returned from the darkness. Elaine Morris's forensic report led the entire investigative team to commit all their resources to the next phase. But for the following 2 weeks, every effort yielded no result. From early morning until late at night, the Utah County Police Headquarters was constantly lit, with topographical maps covering the walls, dotted with red pins marking checked locations. Henson was in charge of cross-referencing the list of four-wheel drive truck owners in the entire county, over 300 people. Investigation teams interviewed each person in turn, recording vehicle condition, paint color, tire type and travel history during the time of the incident. Each person had to provide a tire sample for comparison with the tracks recovered at the scene beneath the Provo Bridge. The result: no sample was a complete match. There were a few similar cases in terms of size and tread pattern, but when comparing wear and groove depth, all were eliminated. Meanwhile, the forensics team found no new physical evidence. The DNA samples from Emma's fingernails had not matched the state's criminal database. The federal CODIS system was limited at the time, including only samples from those convicted of felonies, making the chance of identifying the foreign identity under the fingernails almost non-existent. The supplemental report from the mineral mud analysis reconfirmed the earlier conclusion. The red earth was only found in the Spanish Fork southern mine area, but when police checked this area, they only found an empty lot with a few abandoned structures, no truck tracks, and no suspicious objects. Sheriff Mark Delaney continuously held 3 press conferences to update the situation. He spoke briefly that investigative leads are being expanded, but offered no specific details. The media and the public were not easily satisfied with that answer. Reporters waited outside the precinct gates every day, asking rapid-fire questions. Have the police identified a suspect? Why hasn't Lily been found yet? Is the perpetrator a local person? Delaney remained silent most of the time, only saying one sentence: "We are doing everything in our power." In the small town where the Prescott family lived, the atmosphere grew heavy. Every time a police car drove by, residents would watch, anxiously hoping for some news. Local newspapers began calling it the Provo Canyon disappearance, and state television questioned the investigative team's competence. Some people even blamed the victims' parents, suggesting they were negligent for letting the 2 children walk to school alone. Laura Prescott barely left the house, sitting for hours by the window, watching the snow-covered road leading to the wooden bridge where her 2 daughters vanished. James Prescott returned to work at the shop, but colleagues said he often stood silently for hours by an unrepaired car, staring blankly. In the investigation office, the morale of the team also began to sink. Every morning Delaney walked into the room, looked at the pile of files stacked on his desk, his eyes tired. He knew they were in a loop. Collect, cross-reference, eliminate, then return to the starting point. Henson tried to expand the investigation to neighboring counties, checking traffic cameras on highways 18, 9 and 6, but most surveillance systems in the area only stored data for a short time. Data from the week of the incident had been overwritten. There was no way to backtrack the possible route the perpetrator could have used to leave Provo Canyon. 1 week after Emma's burial, rescue efforts for Lily were temporarily suspended due to bad weather. Heavy snow made travel by off-road vehicles nearly impossible, and the Provo River was partially frozen. Police had to withdraw the search team, leaving only a few people on watch. Even so, whenever the ice thawed, they would return, hoping to find some sign, even just a piece of cloth, a shoe, or a small item belonging to the girl. But the successive searches only ended in 0 results. Lily remained completely missing without a trace. By mid-March, after more than 4 weeks with no new evidence, the case was officially transferred to active investigation suspended status, meaning the file remained open but no permanent forces were deployed at the scene. All samples, reports, photos and evidence were sealed and put into storage. Delaney signed the report, his signature bold and definitive, but he knew this was not the end, just a lull that had to be accepted. "We will keep monitoring," he told Henson as the two stood looking at the map full of red pins on the wall. "One day technology will catch up to this silence." When spring arrived and the snow began to melt, the Provo Canyon Valley returned to its peaceful state, as if no incident had ever occurred. But for those involved, that peace was only a thin veneer. The file with code JUN 06214P, the Prescott case, was shelved in the cold storage, waiting for a new lead. In the summary sent to the state of Utah, the final conclusion was simply a few words: no new evidence, investigation suspended, 1 victim missing. When the case was officially suspended from active investigation, file JUN 06214P, internally referred to as the Prescott case, was transferred to the Cold Case Unit of the Utah State Police Department. This unit specializes in handling cases with no remaining leads, where evidence is preserved in cold storage, waiting until technology is advanced enough to answer questions that humans temporarily cannot. On March 28, 2006, all evidence from the case was transported by a specialized vehicle to the storage center in Salt Lake City, a windowless, sealed building with hundreds of uniformly arranged metal cabinets resembling a labyrinth. On shelf number 17, row B, the sealed silver container holding the evidence for the Prescott case was placed next to other cases that had been dormant for decades. Inside the container were Emma's jacket, nylon rope samples, gray fabric fibers, mineral mud samples, and test tubes containing skin cell samples collected from under fingernails. Everything was preserved at 20 bar Circ Tic 6, with absolutely controlled temperature and humidity. The outside of the container bore only the cold inscription, Prescott, ELL, 2006. Lieutenant Sarah Kendall, who was in charge of file storage at the time, recorded a 3-page handover report. She once told a colleague that every case in the vault was like a book being read, folded midway, and the Prescott case was one of the few that made her feel the most persistent heartache. "Something is not right," she noted in the margin of the report. "Too many gaps." But her job was not to investigate, but to preserve, so that when the time came, everything would still be intact. In 2007, the Cold Case Unit began digitizing old files, and the Prescott case was among the first group entered into the system. All crime scene photos, diagrams, forensic reports, testimonies, and witness lists were scanned and saved to the server. DNA samples were assigned unique identifiers, accessible in the National CODIS system when the database expanded. The internal report confirmed, foreign cell samples are suitable for future supplementary analysis if DNA sequencing technology improves. Over the next 3 years, the case gradually faded into oblivion. The press stopped mentioning it, and local residents returned to their normal lives. Only the Prescott family continued to live in the shadow of their pain. Every year, on the anniversary of the sisters' disappearance, they held a small vigil by the wooden bridge, the last place the 2 girls were reportedly seen. A few neighborhood residents also came, lit candles, placed flowers, and then quietly left. Everyone knew that no one truly believed Lily was alive, but no one dared to say it aloud. The girl's mother, Laura Prescott, persistently contacted the police every few months. She kept in touch with Lieutenant Sarah Kendall, asking if there was any new technology that could re-examine the DNA samples. The answer was often not accurate enough yet, or still in the research phase. But Laura did not give up. She printed flyers, set up a website soliciting information, and even contacted crime television shows, hoping someone would remember something. Just one person saying one detail correctly, she once wrote in an email to the local station. "I believe the case will be reopened." Occasionally, the police still received a few anonymous calls. Someone claimed to have seen a girl resembling Lily in Idaho. Another recounted hearing someone brag about hiding a child in the woods. Every lead was recorded and checked, but the results were only dead ends. No new traces, no evidence, no credible witnesses. In 2009, the Prescott case was officially labeled a dormant case, meaning no longer subject to routine investigation. However, within the cold case unit, the Prescott case remained one of special interest due to its clear nature yet lack of resolution. Chief of Police Delaney, although no longer in direct command, often visited the storage room when he came to Salt Lake City. He stood before cabinet number 17, looking at the cold inscription on the metal container, feeling as if he were rereading a story whose ending he never knew. One day, he told Sarah Kendall, "Someone will open this up and find what we missed." In 2010, when Ministrin low-copy DNA technology began pilot testing in a few states, Sarah sent a proposal request to include the Prescott case DNA samples in the retesting list. It took nearly 8 months to receive feedback from the federal laboratory. Preliminary approval sample condition needs reassessment. However, this had to wait for the state's new budget and priority schedule. The Prescott file remained dormant, but at least it had a new note in the electronic catalog, pending DNA reanalysis. Time passed, and new cases emerged, gradually occupying the attention of the media and the police force. But in that cold storage facility, the evidence container labeled Prescott was still checked periodically every 3 months, ensuring the seal was intact, the temperature stable, and the tracking data unchanged. For the cold case team, perfect preservation was the only thing they could do for the victims. Outside the silent world of evidence and files, the Prescott family was still struggling to cope. James became withdrawn, and Laura took a job at the town library. Every evening she wrote in her diary, recording every call with the police, every prayer session, every season of snow covering the wooden bridge. "If one day someone finds the truth," she wrote, "I want them to know that I never stopped believing my children deserved to know what happened." Months later, when summer arrived earlier than usual, and the snow melted quickly in the mountains, Lieutenant Sarah Kendall received a call from the Utah State Medical Examiner's office. The lab had just been granted funding for the new DNA testing phase. The priority list included 10 unsolved cases from the past decade, and Prescott was in 7th position. That call, seemingly just an administrative announcement, opened the path to the first turning point in the case that had been dormant for nearly 4 years. 4 years after the Prescott file was stamped temporarily suspended, the Provo River still flowed peacefully through the quiet valleys, seemingly having washed away all memory of the tragedy. In June 2010, a heavy rainstorm lasted for several days, causing the river level to rise and the current to become strong. As the Utah County Flood Control Team walked along the riverbank to clear debris and trash, an employee named Todd Jensen incidentally saw something stuck between 2 rocks in the bend about 2 miles from the Prescott wooden bridge. At first glance, he thought it was just a piece of cloth or a plastic bag, but when he bent down to pull it out, Todd realized it was a light blue child's jacket, the collar still faintly printed with a rabbit, the logo of the children's brand Lily Prescott used to wear. Todd immediately called the local police. Within an hour, the area was cordoned off, and state forensic personnel arrived. Although the jacket was worn and mud-caked, the zipper was intact, and even half of the brand label could be read. Police Chief Mark Delaney, upon receiving the information, was silent for a few seconds before saying, "Take it to the technical lab. Don't miss anything." The jacket was placed in a moisture-proof sealed bag, and immediately transported to the examination room of the Utah State Cold Case Unit, where the Prescott case file was stored. 2 days later, the forensic laboratory conducted a preliminary examination. Under the microscope, technician Renee Wallace discovered a short, black strand of hair in the collar seam, which did not match the hair color of any member of the Prescott family. The hair strand was intact at the root, suitable for DNA extraction. Simultaneously, the mud samples clinging to the cuff were compared with the soil samples collected from Emma's clothes 4 years earlier. The results quickly stunned the entire team. The mineral composition perfectly matched the type of mined soil from the Spanish Fork area, where Emma's body was discovered with related signs. The report was immediately forwarded to Lieutenant Sarah Kendall, who had been in charge of the Prescott case since it was transferred to cold case. For the first time in years, she requested to reopen the sealed evidence container. "This could be all that remains of Lily," she said in an internal meeting. "And if so, we can find the person who touched this jacket." Immediately afterward, the forensics lab utilized the Minister technique, the new generation of DNA technology that had just been deployed in Utah State earlier in. This technique allows for the recovery and analysis of DNA samples that are degraded or present in very small quantities, which traditional methods could not achieve before. The hair sample extraction took place in a sealed room for nearly. The automatic sequencer ran continuously, the screen displaying long number sequences representing the extracted gene sequence. When the signal sequence stabilized, Renee looked at the screen, holding her breath. The hair sample DNA was valid, suitable for comparison. The National CODIS database had been expanded since 2008, including individuals previously arrested for violent crimes, not just those convicted. Sarah submitted the DNA sequence code into the system, marking the priority high match urgency. Less than 24 hours later, the results were returned. The screen displayed the line, "Match found, case ID 2002-91A. Henson, now promoted to deputy team leader, pulled up the electronic file in 2002. Daniel Rayfield, 29, was arrested in Ogden for assaulting a colleague in a bar and setting a car on fire. He had a prior record of assaulting a woman in 1999, but the case was dismissed when the victim withdrew the complaint. After serving 18 months in prison, Rayfield left Ogden, registering temporary residence in Spanish Fork, the very area linked to the mineral mud in the Prescott case. The file indicated he had worked as a mechanical worker for a private clay mining operation, which operated until late 2006 and then closed. Delaney, upon receiving the match report, just sighed. "Finally a name," he said. "But this is just the beginning." The police immediately contacted the Utah Department of Justice to confirm Rayfield's status. They received information that he was living in Payson, about 20 minutes drive from Spanish Fork, working as a truck driver transporting construction materials. A perfect match for the type of vehicle that had left the 2-axle tire tracks at the Provo Bridge crime scene. The investigation team requested a covert surveillance warrant. For a week they assigned personnel to monitor Rayfield, recording his travel routes, workplace and contact. He lived alone in an old rented house on the outskirts, keeping to himself, but every morning he drove a silver Ford F-250 pickup, a model whose specifications nearly matched the tire samples collected in the dim light of the camera. The truck drove past the old gas station on Route 6, the very route that leads directly into Provo Canyon. In parallel, the forensics lab continued the deep analysis of the hair sample, comparing it with the DNA stored in Rayfield's 2002 file. The second test confirmed a 99.97% match. There was no longer any doubt Daniel Rayfield was the person who left the DNA trace on Lily Prescott's jacket. The evening the results were received, Sarah Kendall walked out of the lab, and a light rain began to fall. She stopped and looked through the glass, where the Provo River wound under the streetlights, as if still holding unspoken secrets. For 4 years the Prescott case had been considered a closed chapter. Now just a drifting jacket, small, worn, but containing that single strand of hair, had brought the entire file back to life. Delaney convened an emergency meeting. "If Rayfield is connected to the jacket, he may be connected to both Emma and Lily," he said. "We will reopen the entire case, reviewing every old detail, every report, every testimony." And as he closed the thick case file on the table, everyone understood, after 4 years of silence, the Prescott case was officially reopened for reinvestigation, with a single name at the center of all suspicion: Daniel Rayfield. Daniel Rayfield's old file was quickly pulled from the Utah State database. The dry text in the record suddenly became heavy when contrasted with the Prescott case. Same area, same time frame, same type of 2-axle truck, but the detail that chilled the entire investigation team was a small note in the record from February 10, 2006, participated in the volunteer search team for missing children at Provo Canyon. No one on the unit remembered that name appearing then, because at the time, Rayfield was just one of hundreds of local volunteers assisting the rescue team. In old photos archived from the search team's press conference, they found him a man in a gray industrial jacket, standing among the crowd behind Chief of Police Delaney. That jacket had the exact same fabric as the dark gray synthetic fiber found on Emma Prescott's clothes. From that detail, the investigation officially shifted completely. Delaney created a specialized task force solely to monitor and gather information on Rayfield. Henson, now the deputy investigation team leader, was responsible for technical coordination. They collected his vehicle registration data, employment history and personal relationships. Rayfield, born in 1973, had worked as an electrical technician for a private company in Spanish Fork, before being fired in late 2006 for violating regulations and violent behavior. The company's personnel record clearly stated he often worked in the southern clay mine area, the exact location matching the source of the mineral mud on the victim's clothes. Rayfield owned a silver Ford F-250, first registered in 2004, the exact model the police had described from the tire tracks at the Provo Bridge crime scene. When the technical team verified the vehicle identification number, they found the vehicle was still operational and used by him daily to transport materials for a local construction company. Delaney ordered the covert surveillance unit to continue tracking the vehicle's route for 7 days. From the truck's GPS data, the police discovered something suspicious. On February 7, 2006, the time the Prescott sisters went missing, the vehicle's old navigation system recorded an unusual series of coordinates. The truck stopped near the Provo Canyon Bridge area, had then moved south along the route leading to Diamond Fork, and the GPS signal completely disappeared for about 45 minutes. When the system reactivated, the truck had appeared more than 25 miles away, near the abandoned clay mine. All the facts seemed to align into a complete sequence. The morning that information was discovered, Delaney sat quietly in his office for a long time, facing a map with connecting red dots forming a line. He was there, he said softly. He was at both locations at the most critical time. Henson simply nodded, then immediately prepared the file to request a search warrant. The next day, the Utah County Court approved a warrant to search Daniel Rayfield's house and garage, allowing the seizure of all suspicious evidence, especially the vehicle. The SWAT team, in coordination with cold case investigators, moved to his house on the outskirts of Payson at 6 o'clock in the morning. Rayfield lived alone in an old single-story house, surrounded by empty land, and a corrugated iron garage behind it. When the police knocked on the door, he appeared calm, asking for the reason. Henson showed the search warrant, read the contents aloud, and asked him to remain in place. Rayfield shrugged, saying curtly, "Go ahead." In the garage, the yellow fluorescent light shone on a mess of mechanical tools, wires and old paint cans. In the far corner, the silver dust-covered Ford F-250, its tires still caked with dry mud. The forensic team immediately photographed and took mud samples from the tires to compare with the 2006 samples. They also found a partially cut roll of white nylon rope in the toolbox, the same type of rope used to tie Emma's hand. On his workbench, technicians collected a few small items: a rust-stained utility knife, a pair of rubber gloves, and a plastic bag containing a scorched piece of fabric. Preliminary examination showed the fabric matched the gray synthetic fiber type in the old file. In a drawer, they also found an old ID card printed with the Provo Search and Rescue Volunteer logo, certifying Rayfield's participation in the 2006 volunteer search team. Delaney stood in the middle of the garage, observing every detail, his face grim. He returned to the very place he was supposed to be helping, he said quietly. Not to search, but to conceal. While the forensic team continued collecting evidence, Rayfield was detained for questioning. He remained composed, denying any involvement. When Henson asked why his truck's GPS recorded his location at the Provo Canyon Bridge, the very morning of the disappearance, Rayfield replied briefly, "I was making a delivery for the power company, they have record." But when police checked, there were no power company orders that day, and Rayfield could not provide any evidence or witnesses to confirm his statement. The initial examination results from the technical lab were sent back that same evening. The mud samples on Rayfield's tires completely matched the Spanish Fork mineral samples, and the nylon rope roll in the toolbox had a polymer composition similar to the rope used to tie Emma Prescott's hand. Delaney decided to expand the search to the land behind the house, where Rayfield dumped trash and old materials. Under the damp soil, the technical team found many pieces of rusty metal, along with a scrap of pink fabric, the remainder of a child's shirt. Everything was sealed and taken to the forensic lab. As night fell, the small house in Payson was illuminated by the blue and red lights of the police. Delaney stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the cold, dry air, his gaze directed toward the distant mountains, where the Prescott sisters had vanished. He knew this was only the beginning of another battle. This time no longer a desperate search, but a hunt for the person who had crossed the line between victim and rescuer. The person who had used the very role of volunteer to cover up his crime for all these years. The search of Daniel Rayfield's house lasted for 2 consecutive days, with coordination from the Utah Cold Case Unit, the Crime Scene Forensics Team, and the Utah County Sheriff's Office. The entire area of the small house in Payson was sealed off, with yellow crime scene do not cross tape stretched all around the yard. Inside, every item, every tool was numbered, photographed, and meticulously recorded. Sheriff Mark Delaney personally supervised, knowing this could be the only chance to firmly tie Rayfield to the guilt he had hidden for 4 years. In the garage, the forensic technical team collected an ash-gray protective coverall. The industrial synthetic fabric faded with age. The collar and cuffs were covered in red soil, and notably, on the left lapel, there were a few thin pink fibers mixed in with the gray threads. When examined under a microscope, specialist Renee Wallace recognized that they shared the same structure as the fabric fibers previously found on Emma Prescott's clothing. She immediately cut the sample, sealed it, and sent it to the DNA analysis lab. If it matches, we'll have the first piece of physical evidence directly connecting Rayfield to the victim, Renee quietly said over the radio. Inside the main house, Henson and 2 other investigators scrutinized the filing cabinet and desk. In the 3rd drawer from the bottom, they discovered an envelope containing a folded receipt, and inside, a purchase receipt from Valley Hardware Supply Store, dated February 5, just 2 days before the Prescott sisters went missing. The item description was clearly printed: nylon cord roll, 50 FNT color white. In the corner of the receipt was a faint signature, but a quick comparison with Rayfield's signature in his vehicle registration file confirmed a match. The nylon cord sample collected in the garage was placed side by side with the cord previously used to bind Emma's hands. The size, color, twist and thickness were almost completely identical. During the bedroom check, investigator Carter Bowen discovered an old tin box hidden behind the wardrobe. Inside, among various postcards and petty receipts, was an undeveloped roll of Kodak 35mm film. The technical team developed it at the makeshift laboratory that same night. When the photos appeared under the dim light of the enlarger, everyone was practically holding their breath. In one picture, Rayfield could be seen standing on a dirt road leading into Diamond Fork Canyon with a red dirt embankment behind him, exactly the area where Emma Prescott's body was found. Another picture showed a stream and a small wooden bridge, the angle matching the location where Lily's backpack had been found. Police determined the film was manufactured in late 2005, proving the photos could not be random snapshots taken after the crime. He was there, Delaney said, his voice hoarse. Perhaps before or after the crime. The photos were sealed as Type A evidence, the highest level of importance in the case file. While the scene in Payson continued to be processed, the Utah State Forensics Lab worked urgently throughout the night. They compared Rayfield's DNA, obtained with a legal medical search warrant, with the DNA sample recovered from under Emma Prescott's fingernails 4 years prior. The results were sent back early the next morning. The report was brief, only a few lines, but enough to silence the entire conference room. DNA comparison complete. Profile match confirmed. 99.99% probability. Sample origin: Daniel Rayfield. Delaney placed the report on the table, his eyes showing a mixture of fury and relief. "We got him," he whispered. After 4 years, every trace finally closed into a circle, from the fabric fiber, the mineral-rich mud, the nylon cord, to the DNA sample, all pointing to one person. However, the investigation was not over yet. The forensics team continued to process the garage and the land behind the house. Digging deep in the western corner, they discovered a small plastic barrel shallowly buried, containing old clothes, shoes and several ragged belongings. One of them was a small purple athletic shoe, matching the type of shoes Lily Prescott was wearing on the day she disappeared. The picture in the family's file was an almost perfect match. While not yet immediately confirmed, to Delaney, each item felt like a closing piece of a puzzle. The results of the fabric fiber analysis from Rayfield's coverall were completed late that day. The lab confirmed the pink fibers stuck to Rayfield's coverall perfectly matched the fibers on Emma Prescott's clothing, in terms of weave structure, polyester fiber composition, and wear characteristics along the edges. The technical specialist concluded, the probability of a common material source exceeds 99.9%. On the whiteboard in the middle of the room, he wrote 5 short lines. Coverall fiber matches seen. Nylon receipt. 02. There's no more doubt, Rayfield is responsible for Emma Prescott's death. And it's very likely he's also the one who made Lily disappear. The only remaining issue is to arrest him legally. State Prosecutor Miriam Locke agreed to prepare a formal arrest warrant within. She emphasized the need for further verification of the photo time to charge him with the abandonment of the body and kidnapping. The technical team digitized the film, comparing it with light logs and weather data to determine the date of the photo. Preliminary results. The photos at Diamond Fork were taken sometime between the 8th and 9th of February 2006. Exactly matching the time Emma was determined to have died. As the meeting ended, everyone silently looked at the wall map where 3 red pins connected: Provo Canyon, Spanish Fork, Payson. The 3 points formed a closed triangle, marking the journey of a killer who once stood in the crowd pretending to search for his own victim. Outside the headquarters, the Utah air was freezing. Delaney stepped out, looking at the city lights reflecting on the snow. After 4 years and countless dead ends, they finally held all the necessary pieces. He knew that when the warrant was signed, it wouldn't just be a case closed, but justice returned to 2 lost children, and to a family that had waited for nearly half a decade. While Daniel Rayfield's arrest warrant was being finalized, Delaney's investigation team continued to review all auxiliary data, things that seemed minor but could change the entire case. Lieutenant Henson requested a recheck of old traffic camera systems along Highway 189, which connects Provo Canyon and Spanish Fork, the area identified as Rayfield's probable route on the day the Prescott sisters disappeared. The state's image technology lab digitized the stored footage from 2006, most of it blurry and noisy, but within those hundreds of hours of black and white images, they found a detail that stunned everyone. A frame recorded at 8 on February 7, 2006, showed Rayfield's silver Ford F-250 passing through the toll booth north of Provo Canyon. In the passenger seat, there was another man, wearing a baseball cap, tall and thin, with his face turned towards the window. Even blurry, the facial recognition system identified familiar features. Comparing it with the residency records of the Prescott neighborhood, Henson realized it was Alan Ward, a neighbor who lived only 2 houses away from the Prescott family. Ward had been briefly interviewed after the disappearance in 2006. At the time, he claimed that morning he was fixing a water pipe in the backyard, and had not left home. But the video showed him sitting in Rayfield's car exactly when the 2 children were presumed missing. That could not be a coincidence. Delaney requested Ward's record check that same night. Alan Ward, 42, was a former colleague of Rayfield's at the private utility company Mountain Utilities in Spanish Fork. The 2 worked together on the high-voltage line repair crew between. When Rayfield was fired for violent behavior, Ward also quit just 1 month later. Since 2005 he had been unemployed, making a living doing odd jobs for neighbors. Financial records showed Ward was in debt to the bank for over $18,000, along with many overdue consumer loans. Furthermore, in 2006, he received a warning letter from the finance company to repossess his truck, a gray Chevrolet Silverado 4-wheel drive. This truck, according to registration records, had wheel sizes and tire tread patterns similar to the tire tracks previously collected near the Provo Bridge. Police began to connect the pieces. 2 men, both with an electrical background, both familiar with the Spanish Fork mine terrain, both owning 4-wheel drive trucks, and both appearing together near the scene on the morning of the crime. Delaney assessed that if Rayfield was the mastermind, Ward was most likely the person who assisted in transportation or disposal of the body. The investigation team immediately applied for a search warrant for Alan Ward's residence, a small old house about 300 meters from the Prescott home. When police knocked on the door, Ward appeared calm but visibly tense. He claimed he knew nothing about the Rayfield case, and only heard the news on TV. However, when asked about the Silverado, he stammered, saying he had sold it for scrap a long time ago. Investigators checked transaction records at the local scrapyard and found the truck was sold just 2 weeks after the children's disappearance. At Ward's house, police collected several small pieces of evidence, a few old electrical repair receipts with Rayfield's signature, a map of the Diamond Fork area with markings in red pen, and a dusty old USB drive in a desk drawer. When opened, technicians found a series of images of a clay mining site. Several pictures matched the angle of the photos found on the Kodak film at Rayfield's house. In a few frames, the silhouettes of 2 men could be seen, Rayfield and a taller man, wearing a flannel shirt and a baseball cap, fitting Ward's description. That afternoon, the analysis results of the mineral mud from Ward's shoes were returned. A match to the Spanish Fork soil sample, identical to the mud found on Emma's clothing and Lily's jacket. Under the microscope, the hematite and bentonite crystals had the same structure down to the percentage. This was no longer a mere coincidence. When confronted, Rayfield remained silent. He only sneered when he heard the name Alan Ward. "You think he's that smart?" he said in a hoarse voice. "Ward doesn't know anything but driving. He just wanted money." That ambiguous statement further convinced Delaney that Rayfield had not acted alone. He requested prosecutor Miriam Locke to file a dual prosecution case, expanding the suspect pool with charges of accomplice to kidnapping and murder. The GPS data analysis of Rayfield's car also confirmed another suspicious detail. During the 20 minutes of lost signal on the morning of the disappearance, another tracking device was operating simultaneously in the area, transmitting the same frequency as the Silverado system, the model Ward once owned. Although the data was only an old log from the carrier, it showed the 2 vehicles traveled together on the same route before both disappeared from radar near the Spanish Fork mine area. Sheriff Delaney stood before the wall map, using a red pen to circle 2 parallel routes, one for Rayfield's Ford F-250, one for Ward's Chevrolet Silverado. The 2 paths only intersected at one point, Diamond Fork Canyon, exactly where Emma's body was found. "There is no doubt anymore," Delaney said, his voice heavy. "Ward was there." The next morning, Utah County Police officially summoned Alan Ward for questioning. Upon entering the room, he maintained a calm facade, but sweat beaded on his forehead. When investigator Henson placed the camera photo of him sitting next to Rayfield on the table, his face went pale, his lips tightly pressed. "You said you were home that morning," Henson said slowly, "but you were in Rayfield's car, leaving Provo Canyon at 8:41. Ward did not reply. After nearly 10 minutes of silence, he mumbled hoarsely, "I didn't do anything. I just helped him transport goods." "What kind of goods?" "I don't know. I just knew he said we had to go fast." That answer was enough for Delaney to sign a criminal detention order for Alan Ward. Although there was not yet enough evidence to charge him, with the DNA, GPS, and the relationship between the two, police believed they had secured all the missing links in the chain of crimes. That night, in the office with the lights still on, Delaney and Henson sat facing the case map. The 2 parallel red lines were now connected by a closed arc, the journey of 2 men, a meticulous plan, hidden under the guise of good neighbor and rescue volunteer. But now their silence was no longer of any value. The investigation was officially expanding, and from here, Rayfield was no longer alone in his crime. Early on the morning of June 18, 2010, a crew from the Water Utility Department was inspecting the Spanish Fork Reservoir when they found a strange object floating near the spillway. They initially thought it was just a log, but upon closer inspection, they realized it was a large nylon bundle, tightly wrapped with gray duct tape. Police and rescue teams were dispatched immediately. When the nylon bag was pulled ashore, inside was the body of a small girl, light blonde hair, clothes almost decomposed, but the small blue sweater, with a little rabbit on the chest, was still recognizable. No testing was needed, everyone knew, it was Lily Prescott. The scene was immediately sealed off. Forensic pathologist Elaine Morris, who had examined Emma, arrived within an hour. She noticed chilling details that were identical to the previous case. Lily's hands were bound with white nylon cord, the same type and size as the cord binding Emma. There were deep marks around her neck, indicating the cause of death was also asphyxia due to strangulation. However, what caught the attention of the investigative team was that on the duct tape wrapped around the victim's wrist, under a layer of dry mud, a technician found an intact fingerprint. This print was photographed and immediately sent to the state analysis lab. While the body was transported to the forensic center, police searched the entire reservoir area. About 200 meters from where the body was found, they found faint four-wheel drive tire tracks on the damp ground, along with a long drag mark, as if a heavy object had been pulled. The mud sample here once again matched the characteristic minerals of the Spanish Fork mine area, the same type of mud found on Emma's clothes and Lily's jacket. Delaney stood silently for a long time, looking at the calm water surface, where small ripples were still spreading slowly. He quietly said to Henson, "We found the girl, but this only confirms one thing. They were not alone." The fingerprint analysis results arrived that same afternoon. The report from the Utah State Data Center clearly stated, fingerprint on the duct tape matches Alan Ward, 100% correlation. In the conference room, everyone was silent. Ward was initially only considered an accomplice suspect, but now, the evidence had directly tied him to the scene. When confronted, Ward appeared broken. He admitted to being at the reservoir, but still insisted he didn't kill anyone, saying Rayfield was the one who did it, and he just helped secure the bag to throw it in the water. According to his statement, that morning Rayfield said he would take care of the rest after Emma died, and then forced Ward to drive with him to the reservoir area. Ward recounted that Rayfield carried a large nylon bag, inside which looked like a wrapped blanket, and threatened to kill him if he didn't help. Although the statement could not yet be fully verified, the details of the nylon cord, duct tape, the fingerprint, and the mud sample formed a solid chain of evidence. At least two perpetrators were involved in the same crime. That evening at the forensic department, Dr. Morris completed Lily's body examination. She wrote in the report, "Victim died of strangulation by nylon cord. Time of death coincided with the approximate time Emma was murdered. Signs of movement indicate the body was transported by truck." These short, cold lines closed the 4-year disappearance of the little girl. Sheriff Delaney looked at the forensic photos placed side by side, 2 sisters, 2 bodies, 2 identical murder methods. The evidence was too clear. He nodded faintly to Henson, his voice lowered. "Now we know for sure Rayfield and Ward did this together, and this time nothing will be hidden anymore." 2 names were on the document the investigation team had waited 4 years for: Daniel Rayfield and Alan Ward. At 6 o'clock in the morning, police simultaneously raided 2 locations, the small house in Payson where Rayfield was temporarily residing, and the Utah County Jail where Ward was being held for questioning. Everything happened almost concurrently, giving no one a chance to react or destroy evidence. When the door was kicked open, Rayfield only had time to turn his head, his eyes glaring, then quietly offered his hands. "What else do you plan to find?" "I've told you everything," he said, half defiant, half desperate. Both were taken back to the investigation headquarters in 2 separate vehicles, questioned in 2 different rooms. From the very first minute they began to blame each other. Rayfield was cold, stating that Ward was the one who strangled the 2 girls. "He's weak, easily panicked. I just helped cover it up," he said, his eyes never leaving the recording camera lens. When the interrogator mentioned that his DNA was found under Emma's fingernails, Rayfield merely gave a dry laugh. "I was trying to save the girl, but it was too late." In the opposite room, Ward told a different story, that Rayfield was the mastermind, that he was just a forced accomplice. "I owed him money, and he threatened to expose me for stealing electric cables if I didn't help," Ward said, his voice trembling. Both statements contained fragmented pieces, but one detail caught Delaney's attention. Rayfield and Ward both mentioned the same person, Melanie. "According to Rayfield, she was a woman I used to know through the electric company, someone who helped me get a job again after I was fired." Ward also brought up the name when he recounted that Rayfield had received a strange sum of money from a woman with a private relationship with him, a few days before the crime. The police immediately seized Rayfield's phone for inspection. Inside the phone, technicians recovered dozens of deleted text messages. The message thread extended from early February 2006, the time the crime occurred. One of the prominent messages read, The job is done. I need my share. The text was sent from a number registered under the name Melanie Carter, 38, a former accountant for Mountain Utilities, the company where Rayfield and Ward used to work. Bank transfer history confirmed. Just 3 days after the two girls went missing, Rayfield's account received a $5,000 payment from Carter. Upon checking her finances, police discovered Carter had withdrawn all the money from the account just a few weeks later and moved to Denver, Colorado. The investigation was immediately expanded in the financial direction. The Utah State Investigation Bureau coordinated with the FBI to trace transactions, finding that Melanie Carter was responsible for contracting payments for a civil electricity project in the Provo Canyon area. That project was then under suspicion of budget embezzlement, and Rayfield was one of the supervising technicians. It was highly likely that Carter had used Rayfield to dispose of evidence of the construction fund embezzlement, and when the two Prescott girls accidentally witnessed or were caught by Rayfield in the construction area, they became unwanted witnesses. Delaney reread every message, his eyes cold. If Carter is involved, he told Henson, then this isn't just a murder, it's an organized conspiracy to conceal a crime. That afternoon, Utah State Police sent an urgent subpoena to Denver, demanding Melanie Carter appear for questioning. At headquarters, Ward began to break down. After nearly 8 hours of interrogation, he admitted to helping Rayfield move the bodies of the two girls, in exchange for having his $10,000 debt erased. He insisted he did not know Rayfield's real motive, only thinking it was private business between him and someone at the old company. Meanwhile, Rayfield continued to remain silent, asking only one question when he was let out: did Carter say anything? That night the two were separately confined in isolation cells. In the long hallway, the yellow light spilled onto the cold iron door. Delaney paused, looking into Rayfield's cell. 4 years ago, he stood among the crowd, wearing a hard hat, volunteering to search for the two children. Now he himself was handcuffed for killing them. But Delaney knew there was still another hand behind Rayfield, Melanie Carter, the woman in the shadows, who had paid for the blood of two innocent children. While Rayfield and Ward were detained awaiting questioning, the Utah State Financial Investigation Team continued to scrutinize documents related to Melanie Carter. The banking and insurance data collected by the FBI in Denver showed that Carter's transactions did not stop at the $5,000 transfer to Rayfield. From an encrypted folder on her personal computer, technicians found life insurance policies under the names of the two sisters, Emma and Lily Prescott, established on January 23, 2006. Just 2 weeks before the girls went missing. The contract listed the sole beneficiary, Melanie Carter. When this information was presented, Delaney almost couldn't believe it. An outsider cannot legally be the beneficiary of a minor's insurance policy, he said, unless there is a legal authorization from the parents. The Financial Investigation Department sent the file to LifeSure Inc., the insurance company that issued the policies. There, archival staff confirmed, the person in charge of the file was Melanie Carter, who was then working temporarily in the regional agency department. They provided a copy of the authorization form and the electronic signature of Laura Prescott, the girl's mother, along with a perfectly matching social security number and personal information. But when Delaney showed the signature sample to Laura, she was nearly stunned. "I never signed any insurance papers for my children," she stammered. "Melanie is my older sister. She once said she would help me set up a college savings plan for the girls." Laura's testimony made the entire picture clearer. Melanie Carter, Laura's biological sister, had lived in Provo before moving to Spanish Fork, where Rayfield and Ward worked. In 2005, Carter faced serious financial difficulties, credit debt, and an investigation into embezzlement at her former company. At the same time, she discovered Laura had just received a compensation payment from her husband's job, over $40,000, part of which was intended for the children's education. Delaney theorized that Carter conceived the idea to exploit her job at the insurance company to forge the documents, using her sister's real information to open 2 life insurance policies for Emma and Lily, each valued at. In the event of the girls' deaths, the compensation money would be transferred to the beneficiary, Carter. Investigator Henson reviewed the communication history between Carter and Rayfield. They exchanged messages continuously during the first 3 months of. In one text, Carter wrote, "If something happens, you know what to do. I will handle the rest." When questioned, Rayfield refused to answer, but Ward confirmed he had heard Rayfield say a woman paid to deal with the two kids. At the time he thought it was just an empty threat. The handwriting analysis department was asked to compare the Laura Prescott signature in the insurance file with her true signature on her house deed and bank records. The results showed the signature in the file was completely forged. The lines were copied using a graphics pen, the strokes and pressure uneven, similar to the signature forgery technique Carter had access to while working in the insurance industry. Additionally, LifeSure confirmed the file was never reported to the main headquarters. Carter had handled it internally, using administrator access to input data, which temporarily legalized the two contracts in the internal database, but not yet reached the underwriting stage. Financial motive, Delaney stated definitively during the meeting that evening. Carter created fake contracts, hired Rayfield, who needed money and had a relationship with her, to stage an accident, but everything spun out of control. When Emma and Lily resisted, Rayfield acted, and Ward helped him dispose of the bodies. Henson nodded, his eyes hardening. She's not just an accomplice, she ordered the deaths. That night, an emergency arrest warrant for Melanie Carter was sent to Denver. When federal police raided her apartment, Carter only managed to ask one question. So Daniel finally talked. That statement was enough to confirm all suspicions. In the summary report sent back to Utah, Delaney wrote the final line: motive, method, insurance fraud, premeditated murder. Instigator, Melanie Carter. Accomplices, Daniel Rayfield and Alan Ward. The Prescott case, after 4 years buried in darkness, was now fully exposed. Not just the crime of two men, but the cold-blooded conspiracy of a family member, all for the sake of numbers on an insurance contract. When the emergency arrest warrant was issued, Utah State Police, in coordination with the FBI, immediately launched a special operation to locate Melanie Carter, the woman behind the entire tragedy that claimed the lives of two innocent children. However, when police arrived at her apartment in Denver, the address listed in her tax records, Melanie had vanished. The door was locked, belongings were cleared out, leaving only a half-empty coffee cup and a desktop computer still on. Checking neighborhood cameras, the investigation team discovered Carter leaving the building in the early morning, carrying a large suitcase, driving a rented sedan heading toward Nevada. A nationwide manhunt was launched the same day, her photo appearing on the federal system with the note "suspect in first-degree murder, armed, dangerous." The ensuing hours were a cross-state pursuit. The FBI utilized a system for tracking credit card usage and federal traffic data, confirming the rented car had stopped for gas in LA, Nevada, and then continued west. At this point, Special Agent Ryan McAllister, in charge of the apprehension, ordered the blockade of the entire Highway 50, cutting off all routes out of the small town of Fallon. That afternoon, a gas station attendant reported seeing a woman exactly like the one in the wanted photo stopping to buy water and a paper map. Security camera footage confirmed it was indeed Melanie Carter. At 9:17 p.m., a federal SWAT team intercepted her car in the desert area near Fallon, just over 30 miles from the California border. When police signaled her to stop, Carter did not resist, sitting still in the driver's seat, hands on the steering wheel. In the trunk, they found over $18,000 in cash, a fake passport under the name Melissa Crane, and a bank card from the Cayman Islands, enough to prove she was attempting to flee the country. In the interrogation room in Reno, Carter maintained a chilling composure. When asked about her relationship with Rayfield, she only said, "He needed money. I needed silence." But when investigators presented the evidence, from the life insurance contracts, transfer receipts, text messages, to Ward's testimony, the coldness on her face gradually cracked. Finally, Melanie bowed her head, admitting everything. She was the one who planned it. According to her testimony, in January 2006, Carter knew she was about to be fired and investigated for financial fraud. She approached Rayfield, whom she had known during her time on the electricity project, to discuss the plan to fraudulently obtain the life insurance money. Carter forged the documents, impersonating her sister Laura Prescott, and told Rayfield that just make it look like an accident or a disappearance, and she would pay him a large reward. Rayfield agreed, bringing in Alan Ward, a struggling neighbor, as an assistant. According to her confession, Carter paid $5,000 up front, promising to split the remainder after receiving the insurance payout. But when the situation spiraled out of control, The two children were killed instead of being staged as missing. She panicked, cut off contact and fled to Colorado. When her own statement was read back to her, Carter only whispered, "I didn't think he would actually do it." Delaney, who was present during the interrogation, coldly replied, "But you wrote the plan, and two children died exactly as you arranged." The final FBI report clearly stated, Melanie Carter, 38, was apprehended in Fallon, Nevada, admitted to conspiracy to commit premeditated murder and insurance fraud. Two accomplices, Daniel Rayfield and Alan Ward, have been detained in Utah. After 4 years and hundreds of hours of investigation, the final curtain of the Prescott case was lifted. A ruthless conspiracy, rooted in greed and betrayal within the victim's own family. As the convoy carrying Carter returned to Utah in the night, Police Chief Delaney looked out the window, seeing the red lights reflected on the snow. He knew the hunt was over, but justice was only just beginning. In October 2011, nearly a year after Melanie Carter's arrest in Nevada, the Utah State Supreme Court officially opened the trial of Prescott v. State, attracting nationwide attention. The courtroom was packed with the press, the public, and the families who had followed the case for years. On the defendant's bench sat three individuals who had once been connected in different roles: Daniel Rayfield, the direct killer; Alan Ward, the one who helped dispose of the bodies; and Melanie Carter, the one who planned and paid them. Chief Prosecutor Miriam Locke led the prosecution team, presenting what was considered one of the most complex investigative files in the state's history. In the early days of the trial, evidence was introduced piece by piece, each detail like a knife slicing through the thick air of the courtroom. First was the DNA evidence. Skin cells found under Emma Prescott's fingernails matched Rayfield perfectly, undeniable proof. Next was the gray fiber on Rayfield's worksuit, an absolute match with the fabric found on the victim's clothing. Sheriff Delaney, a key witness, presented the entire process of solving the case, from the pink backpack under the Provo Bridge to the discovery of Lily's body in the Spanish Fork Reservoir. He spoke in a calm voice but choked up when recalling how the two children were tied with the same type of nylon rope, purchased just days before the disappearance. The technology unit projected a GPS map simulating the journey of Rayfield's and Ward's vehicles on the morning of February 7, 2006, two parallel signals moving simultaneously from Provo Canyon to Diamond Fork. The stopping points coincided with the locations where the bodies were found, and carrier data proved their vehicles lost signal exactly at the time of Emma's death. Combined with financial data, a $5,000 transfer from Melanie Carter's account to Rayfield, the full picture became clear: a meticulously planned conspiracy, not a random crime. The most shocking part of the trial was when the prosecution presented the life insurance policies bearing the names of the two Prescott children. The room fell silent as the handwriting expert confirmed that the signature of Laura Prescott on the documents was forged, created by Melanie Carter herself. The evidence was reinforced by financial logs and text messages between Carter and Rayfield. "If everything is done, you will get your share." When the prosecutor asked her reason for doing it, Carter just bowed her head, eyes vacant. "I was in debt and thought I could control it. I didn't think they would die." After 3 weeks of debate, the jury concluded Daniel Rayfield was guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, body disposal and insurance fraud. Alan Ward was guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and accessory after the fact. And Melanie Carter was guilty of intentional conspiracy to commit murder, document forgery, and large-scale financial fraud. Judge Robert McGill delivered the sentence in a stifling atmosphere: Daniel Rayfield, life in prison without parole; Alan Ward, life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. As the sentence was read, Laura Prescott, the mother who had lost both children, sat motionless, tears streaming down her face but no sound of crying. After nearly 6 years, justice was finally served, though it could not bring Emma and Lily back. The Prescott case officially closed on November 12, 2011, after more than a year of investigation and 27 working sessions. Sheriff Delaney was invited to speak to the press, and he said simply, "Justice never dies, it just waits until people are patient enough to find it again." Outside the courthouse, the first snow of the season fell lightly on the steps, covering the road leading back to Provo Canyon where it all began. And in that snow, the story of the two Prescott children closed, leaving an indelible reminder in Utah's memory: "Greed can kill kin, but justice will always find the light." When the final sentence was pronounced, the entire Prescott case file was transferred to the Utah Cold Case Unit for archiving and summarization. The report, over 600 pages thick and chiefly authored by Sheriff Mark Delaney, meticulously documented the entire investigation process that spanned over 5 years, from the day sisters Emma and Lily Prescott disappeared until the 3 perpetrators faced the court. In the opening section, Delaney wrote, "No case is solved by one person. Every small piece of evidence, every drop of sweat from the quiet people behind the scenes, created justice for these 2 children." The file precisely tabulated 47 pieces of evidence were collected, sealed, and examined through multiple stages. Among them, 17 pieces of evidence were critical, including the DNA sample under Emma's fingernails, the gray fiber on Rayfield's worksuit, the Spanish Fork mineral mud traces, the receipt for the nylon rope, photographs taken at Diamond Fork, Lily's shoes and Alan Ward's fingerprints on the tape wrapped around the bodies. Each piece of evidence was a connecting link, forming a complete picture of the criminal journey. A total of 12 forensic specialists from state and federal laboratories directly participated, analyzing DNA, identifying fabric fibers, simulating GPS data, and recovering digital messages. In the summary, the investigative team emphasized 2 technological factors that played a groundbreaking role: next-generation DNA, mini-ester, and vehicle GPS tracking. The DNA sample of only a few cells under Emma's fingernails, which was considered insufficient data in 2006, was successfully decoded using mini-ester technique in 2010, marking the first breakthrough in identifying Rayfield. The GPS tracking system, though only common in commercial trucks at the time, accurately recorded the movements of him and Ward, perfectly matching the crime scene and the victim's time of death. Without these 2 technologies, Delaney noted in the report, we would never have recovered the truth. Furthermore, the factor of federal cooperation was considered the third key. From the FBI to the National Insurance Bureau and the Financial Tracing Unit, over 30 federal personnel assisted in tracking Melanie Carter's trail, helping to expose the financial motive behind the crime. Carter's forgery of the life insurance policies, hiring Rayfield, and involving Ward, was a typical example of financial fraud leading to murder, a type of crime rarely encountered in Utah previously. The summary report also addressed the difficulties the investigative team faced. The long duration led to the degradation of some evidence, lost camera data, and fading witness memories. But thanks to the Cold Case Unit's standard sample storage system, all crucial evidence was preserved intact for many years, a vital factor for successful reinvestigation. The biggest lesson from the Prescott case, Hinson wrote in the appendix, is that every piece of evidence has a voice. We just need to be patient enough to listen. In January 2012, the Prescott case was recognized by the U.S. Department of Justice as a model case in state-level cold case investigation, becoming an official teaching file for forensic and criminal investigation training courses. Many other states adopted similar procedures for storing DNA and GPS data, using the Prescott case as a prime example of the possibility of reviving investigations from cold files. When signing the last page, Delaney added a short line, "Justice has no expiration date." Under the sealed glass in the cold storage, Lily's pink backpack, Emma's blue jacket, and a piece of white nylon rope remained silent witnesses to a case that once shook the entire state of Utah. But from it, a new chapter in criminal investigation was opened, where technology, perseverance, and humanity meet to bring light back to cases that seem to have been forgotten. The sentence was delivered less than a month ago, but the aftershocks of the Prescott case still reverberated across the state of Utah. In the small towns around Provo Canyon, people still could not believe that such a horrific tragedy originated from within a family. The sister planned it, a neighbor assisted, and a man who once wore a rescue volunteer hat turned out to be a cold-blooded murderer. The press called it the case that shattered trust, while major Salt Lake City newspapers commented, "There is nothing more painful than justice revealing that the devil did not come from a strange darkness, but stepped out from the doorstep of home." In the town of Provo, where sisters Emma and Lily once lived, local authorities and residents erected a small memorial by the old wooden bridge where the 2 girls were last seen. Engraved on the plaque were the simple words, "In loving memory of Emma and Lily Prescott, gone but never forgotten." Every winter when snow covers the bridge, People bring candles and flowers to place beneath the memorial, quietly praying. No one says much, but that silence is heavier than any words. At the first memorial service, the girl's mother, Laura Prescott, stood among hundreds of people holding a photo of her two daughters smiling brightly. She said only one sentence: "Hold on to what they left behind, the truth, and the belief that justice is never lost." This event prompted the entire state to reevaluate how to preserve and handle long-term criminal records. The Utah Department of Justice established the Prescott Memorial Fund, supporting cold case units in storing evidence, particularly DNA and digital data. The evidence from the Prescott case became a classic example of the value of long-term evidence preservation. If Emma's DNA sample had not been kept intact in cold storage for 4 years, or if the GPS data of Rayfield's vehicle had not been backed up, the case might have been permanently forgotten. Thanks to this impact, in 2013, the Prescott file was included in the official curriculum of the U.S. National Police Academy (NPA). In investigator training classes, the case is viewed as a complete model of patience and precision. Crime scene images, the pink backpack, the white nylon rope, the tire tracks in the mud, are displayed as a reminder that every small detail can save a seemingly dead case. Young cadets are required to read the entire file to understand the coordination process between police, forensic and financial levels, as well as the decisive role of not overlooking any evidence, no matter how minor. The Provo community, once shrouded in fear and skepticism, gradually found balance. Local schools established the Emma and Lily Promise Scholarship Fund, supporting students from disadvantaged backgrounds. On a wall near the city library, a mural was painted with an image of the two girls holding hands, looking toward a snow-capped mountain, a symbol of hope. Residents still mention the case, not only with pain, but also as a reminder of the community's strength when facing tragedy. For law enforcement, the Prescott case became a turning point in mindset. Many other states followed Utah's example, investing in cold storage facilities and next-generation DNA analysis technology. An officer who participated in the investigation wrote in the summary report, "If justice is a seed, then evidence preservation is the soil that nourishes it through the years." More than a decade has passed, and whenever someone drives past Provo Canyon Bridge, they still see a couple of white flowers and a pink ribbon swaying in the wind. The story of the two Prescott children is not just a sad memory, but also a symbol of belief in justice and human resilience against time. Utah has changed since then, not just because a case was solved, but because an entire community learned to rise from loss, preserving the light of truth as an integral part of themselves. The story of the Prescott case is not just a tragedy unique to the state of Utah, but it also reflects a profound reality in modern American society. Crime, greed, and deception can hide within the most seemingly intimate relationships, and justice can only exist if we persistently seek the truth. Reading back through the years-long investigation from Lily's pink backpack, the tiny DNA sample under Emma's fingernail, to the insurance policy forged by a family member, one realizes that in a country that values the rule of law and family as much as the U.S., the truth is sometimes obscured by blind trust and limitless greed. Melanie Carter, the biological sister, turned kinship into a tool for profit. But it was DNA technology and the persistent work ethic of the investigative force that brought justice back, though it took over 4 years. That reminds us that in America today, where scientific advances are used in every field from medicine to jurisprudence, every piece of evidence, every act of honesty, holds the value of saving lives and sustaining social trust. The deepest lesson is not in the tragedy, but in how people confronted it: transparency, responsibility, and unwavering adherence to protecting the truth. In modern life, when fake news, financial fraud, or internal family crimes can still occur, we need even more to respect the law, learn caution, and believe in the power of truth, because justice may be late, but as the Prescott story shows, it is never lost. Thank you for following the story of the Prescott case, a journey of justice illuminated after years in the shadows. Please subscribe to the channel to continue exploring other cold case files with us, where the truth is always waiting to be revealed in the next video.